Ethan's boots crunched against the jagged rocks as he climbed the canyon walls of Zarathia. The sky above churned with dark clouds, thick and heavy, full of the planet's relentless storms. Winds howled like wild beasts, carrying the sharp taste of metallic dust. To anyone else, the canyon would have seemed impossible to navigate, but Ethan was human, and humans had a strange talent for pressing on even when everything around them seemed impossible. He had been sent here not only to study the planet's unique ecosystem, but also to understand how the native species survived the harsh environment. Despite the beauty of Zarathia's jagged cliffs and glowing plants that pulsed faintly with bioluminescence, the planet was dangerous. Ethan had been warned about the predator species that roamed the nights, about the corrosive dust storms, and about the strange toxic pools that could melt through skin in minutes. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the sound he had just heard, a faint. It was a desperate cry coming from deeper in the canyon. It was easy to ignore cries here. The colonies of alien species that inhabited Zarathia were cautious, secretive, and above all, indifferent. They had learned to survive by focusing on themselves, by turning away from the suffering of others. A child's cry, an injured adult, even a predator struggling to escape a trap, these things rarely inspired action. Everyone ignored others' pain. Everyone, that is, except for Ethan. He moved carefully, gripping the rocks and balancing against the wind. His eyes scanned the canyon floor, and then he saw them, small, trembling forms pinned beneath a heap of rubble from a recent rockslide. The children's eyes were wide with terror, and their little limbs flailed as they tried to free themselves. Dust covered their skin, which shimmered faintly with colors unfamiliar to him, signs of Zarathia's alien physiology. One of them, a girl with emerald green scales, let out a shrill cry as the rocks pressed down on her legs. Ethan didn't hesitate. He assessed the debris, testing its weight, and then he began lifting pieces of rock with his bare hands. The stones were jagged and heavy, and the wind pushed against him, threatening to knock him off balance. Sweat ran down his face, mixed with dust, but he ignored it. The cries grew more desperate, and Ethan's sense of urgency intensified. "Hold on." He shouted, even though he knew the children might not understand his words. "I'll get you out." One by one, he cleared the rocks, pulling each child free. The girl with green scales clung to his arm, trembling, while another child, smaller and pale blue, hid his face in Ethan's chest, sobbing quietly. The youngest, a tiny boy with skin like molten silver, whimpered but stared at Ethan with wide, fearful eyes, as if silently asking him to save them. When the last rock fell away, Ethan stood, panting, holding the children close. He glanced around, expecting to see adults rushing to help, but there was nothing. The other members of the alien colonies were nearby, watching from a safe distance. They whispered to one another, exchanging gestures and strange clicking sounds, but none moved to assist. Their eyes avoided Ethan, their expressions unreadable. It was the same pattern he had seen before. Everyone ignored the cries of those in danger. Paralyzed by fear or indifference, Ethan's jaw tightened. He had read about this tendency in his research reports, but seeing it firsthand was different. It made the human sense of duty within him flare brighter. He knew he could not rely on others to act. If someone didn't take responsibility, the children could die. He wrapped one of the alien children in a protective blanket he carried in his pack, while the others clung to him or each other. The wind howled around them, pushing dust and debris into their eyes. Ethan led them slowly up the canyon walls, using every ounce of strength to keep them balanced and safe. The climb was dangerous. Rocks shifted beneath his feet, threatening to tumble into the canyon below. Several times, he lost his footing and had to catch himself, all while holding on to the children. When they finally reached a safer ledge, Ethan sat down, breathing heavily. The children stared up at him, their wide eyes filled with a mixture of fear and awe. They had been abandoned, ignored by their own kind, and yet this strange human had risked everything to save them. For the first time, they felt hope. "You're safe now," Ethan said softly. He didn't know if they could understand him fully, but the tone carried the message. "I won't let anything happen to you." As they rested, Ethan observed the children more closely. Something was wrong. Their skin pulsed faintly in an unnatural rhythm, and their breathing was uneven. It was subtle, but enough to trigger concern. Zarathia's environment was already harsh, but exposure to certain toxins in the rocks and dust could alter physiology in unpredictable ways. It appeared these children had been trapped for a long time, exposed to these conditions, were beginning to show signs of mutation. Ethan's mind raced. This was not just a simple rescue. These cries he had answered were not only about immediate danger, they were a warning. The planet's toxicity was spreading faster than the colonies realized. And if no one acted, it could threaten everyone, including the adults who had ignored the children. He couldn't waste time. Ethan knew he had to get the children to a safer area and find a way to warn the colonies. But even the thought of approaching the adult aliens filled him with unease. They had proven time and again that they would rather argue and debate than act. Convincing them of the danger would be a different kind of challenge, one that would test not only his courage but also his patience and understanding of alien psychology. The first step was survival. Ethan led the children through narrow rock passages, avoiding unstable areas and hidden predators. He pointed out safe paths, though the children could not follow his gestures exactly. Their understanding of the terrain was limited. He had to carry some of them, encouraging others to move on their own when possible. Every step was a test of endurance. Every gust of wind a reminder that Zarathia did not forgive mistakes. During their journey, the children began to respond to Ethan's calm presence. The green-scaled girl, who had been shaking violently when he first found her, now clung to his side more confidently. The silver-skinned boy whispered questions in his strange language. Pointing to rocks and plants with curiosity rather than fear, Ethan smiled, realizing that the human ability to communicate trust and reassurance transcended language barriers. Even here, on a distant world filled with alien species, empathy worked. Hours passed, and night began to fall. The sky darkened into deep shades of violet and black, lit by occasional flashes of alien lightning. The wind's howl intensified, carrying the scent of metallic dust and the faint acrid smell of the planet's toxic pools. Ethan found a small overhang in the canyon wall and decided it was the safest place to rest for the night. He created a makeshift shelter with his equipment, ensuring the children were protected from the worst of the storm as they huddled together. The children's breathing began to stabilize, and Ethan allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He knew that saving the children was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead: how to get the colonies to act. He could not rely on their instinct to survive, or their intelligence to reason. They had shown both could be paralyzed by fear and apathy. Only a demonstration, a direct encounter with the danger, might compel them to take responsibility. Ethan's mind raced with ideas. He could study the mutations in the children and show the effects to the adults, or perhaps create a warning system using the planet's natural resources. Whatever he chose, he knew it would require courage, patience, and ingenuity. Humans had a strange way of facing impossible odds, not by hiding from them, but by confronting them head-on. Outside the shelter, the storm raged on. Lightning split the sky, revealing jagged cliffs and deep ravines that could swallow anyone who misstepped. Ethan's eyes followed the flashes, scanning for movement, alert for predators or falling debris. Every moment was dangerous, yet every moment reinforced his determination. The children were counting on him, and he would not let them down. Hours later, as the storm began to subside, Ethan prepared to move again. He packed supplies carefully, checking each item for damage, and made sure the children were secure. The canyon was still treacherous, and every step could be their last if they were careless. Yet Ethan moved with confidence, his knowledge of human endurance guiding him through the alien landscape. Finally, as dawn broke over the jagged horizon, the first light revealed a faint path leading toward a larger, safer area where the colonies gathered. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. This was no longer just a rescue, it was the beginning of a mission to awaken the alien species to the dangers around them, to show them that ignoring cries for help could have devastating consequences. The children looked up at him, their eyes filled with trust and hope. Ethan smiled and said, "We'll get there, together." In that moment, he knew that even if everyone else ignored their cries, one brave human could make as he led the group forward. Navigating the rocky terrain and avoiding hidden hazards, Ethan realized that courage was contagious. The children followed closely, stepping more confidently with each passing moment. The canyon, once a symbol of danger and despair, now seemed like a path to hope, a path that only humans, with their Ethan led the group of children down the canyon path as the first rays of sunlight lit the jagged cliffs of Zarathia. The air smelled sharp and metallic, and the dust storms from the night had left the ground uneven and slippery. The children clung to him, some holding his hands, others brushing their palms along the rocks for balance. Despite the danger, there was a new determination in their eyes. For the first time, they felt someone cared, and that gave them courage. As they approached the larger colony area, Ethan could see the adults gathered in their fortified dwellings. The colony was bustling, but in a strange, nervous way. Creatures of various shapes and sizes moved about, exchanging hurried signals and gestures, yet all eyes avoided the children. The adults had noticed something different, a small group of young ones emerging from the canyon, led by a human who had risked his life. Their curiosity mingled with suspicion. Ethan stepped forward, his hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "They are safe," he said. His voice carried clearly, and though the alien adults didn't fully understand his words, they could sense the confidence behind them. The children peeked from behind him, their eyes wide but trusting. The adult aliens responded with a mixture of hesitation and disbelief. Some clicked and hissed at one another, their alien language sharp and staccato, expressing doubt. Others remained frozen, unwilling to act or acknowledge. Ethan, he realized quickly that convincing them would require more than words. It would require proof. He knelt beside one of the children and examined the faint changes in their skin. Signs of the toxic exposure from the canyon debris. "Look at this," he said, touching a glowing vein beneath the girl's green scales. The adults leaned closer, some out of curiosity, some out of wariness. Ethan pointed to the uneven pulse and subtle color shifts, explaining carefully, step by step, how prolonged exposure to Zarathia's toxins could affect anyone. Even their adult population. Some of the elders hissed in objection. "This is exaggeration." One said, its voice low and urgent, vibrating through the air. "The children will recover. We always survive here. There's no danger that cannot be ignored." Ethan shook his head. "No," he replied firmly. "This is real. If you do nothing, more will suffer. I saved them because no one else would, but you can save yourselves now, if you choose to act." The tension in the colony was palpable. Eyes flicked between Ethan and the children, the glowing veins and irregular breathing patterns providing undeniable evidence of danger. Slowly, curiosity began to outweigh fear. Some adults approached cautiously, observing the children, and a few whispered among themselves. The weight of inaction had suddenly become clear. Ignoring danger would no longer protect them. Ethan knew he had only a small window of opportunity. He gestured to the canyon paths and the unstable cliffs above. "The canyon is unstable. Rocks will fall, storms will worsen, and the toxic air is spreading. If you stay here without preparing, you risk your lives. I can show you how to survive." He began demonstrating small but effective techniques for navigating the dangerous terrain, using simple ropes to anchor themselves, creating barriers with rocks to redirect debris, and using reflective materials to warn others of falling hazards. The alien adults, initially skeptical, began copying his movements, their curiosity overtaking their fear. Ethan's human ingenuity was contagious. Hours passed, and the colony began to work together, guided by Ethan's leadership. Some children ventured forward cautiously, inspired by their rescued peers. They mimicked Ethan's movements, learning quickly. Slowly, the alien adults realized that their traditional ways of dealing with the planet's hazards were insufficient. Survival required adaptation, and adaptation required courage and cooperation. Ethan worked tirelessly, moving between groups, checking each child, and instructing adults. He built makeshift shelters for those still trapped in unstable parts of the colony, devised warning systems for the toxic air, and he even helped construct a rudimentary alarm system that used reflective surfaces to alert others of falling debris. Every action reinforced a simple truth: humans could think and act under pressure in ways that others often could not. By the time the first dust storm of the new day swept across the colony, they were ready. The shelters held firm, the warning systems worked, and the children and adults were trained to move safely through the canyon. Even the skeptical elders nodded in acknowledgement, recognizing Ethan's contributions. It was a moment of quiet victory, but also a realization: this planet was dangerous, and courage was more valuable than tradition. As night fell, Ethan took a moment to rest, sitting beside the children he had saved. They huddled close, exhausted but alive. Their eyes shone with trust and admiration. They had witnessed bravery, and it had changed something inside them. Ethan knew the adults had seen it too. One human, acting with compassion and courage, could inspire an entire species to rethink how they approached danger, responsibility, and empathy. The storm raged outside, but within the colony, there was a sense of unity that had never existed before. Alien species that had previously ignored each other's cries were now working together. They shared tools, exchanged knowledge, and even comforted the children. The air was still tense, but it was different now. It carried hope. Ethan stood on a cliff overlooking the colony, the children at his side, their small hands gripping his. The landscape stretched out before him, jagged and dangerous, yet full of possibility. He thought of the countless others who might face similar danger, ignored and left to fend for themselves. Humans might be a small part of the galaxy, but their willingness to act, to care, and to face fear head-on could ripple across worlds. He remembered the first time he had heard the cries in the canyon. How easily anyone could have walked away. How easily these children could have been lost forever. And yet here they were, alive and safe, because one human refused to turn away. The weight of that realization filled him with quiet satisfaction. The next morning, the colony held a gathering. The children were at the center, showing the adults that they had survived. The elders spoke, their voices tinged with respect for Ethan, though they struggled with the concept that one human had changed so much. He did not seek praise, but it came anyway, expressed in gestures and murmurs that transcended language. The children clung to him, demonstrating that trust could bridge the gap between species. Ethan took the opportunity to speak again, carefully explaining the dangers still present on Zerathia and the need for continued vigilance. He instructed the colony on ways to strengthen their shelters, monitor the toxic areas, and work together to prevent further harm. It was not just about survival, it was about learning to care for each other. The alien adults listened this time, not with skepticism, but with intent. They followed his instructions, moving with coordination and purpose. Humans, Ethan realized, had an unusual ability to inspire action through courage and empathy. It was a trait that the galaxy needed, especially in worlds like this, where fear often outweighed reason. Over the following weeks, the colony thrived under the combined guidance of their own species and Ethan's human insight. Children played safely among reinforced shelters, adults patrolled the canyon paths with newfound confidence, and the toxic areas were monitored and marked. Ethan had not only saved lives but had sparked a transformation. The aliens began to help each other, to notice cries of distress rather than ignore them, and to take responsibility for their world. Ethan often found himself watching the children he had saved. They had become more curious, more daring, and more willing to learn from him. He taught them small things: how to assess danger, how to protect themselves, and how to care for one another. They absorbed every lesson, their eyes wide with trust and excitement. Each moment reminded him that bravery and empathy were contagious and that humans carried those traits in ways that could shape entire civilizations. One evening, as the twin moons of Zerathia rose, Ethan stood with the children on a high ridge overlooking the colony. The wind was calmer now, the storms receding. The colony below moved with purpose, no longer paralyzed by fear or indifference. Ethan realized that the planet, once a symbol of danger and apathy, had become a place where hope could grow. The children whispered to him in their alien language. Words he could not fully understand, yet the meaning was clear. They thanked him not just for saving them, but for showing them what courage and compassion could accomplish. He smiled, ruffling their hair, and told them that the real thanks would be in how they treated others in the future. That was the as he looked out over the canyon and the thriving colony. Ethan felt a sense of quiet pride. Humans were small in the galaxy, but their ability to care, to act, and to inspire could make a difference in even the most indifferent of worlds. One brave human had answered cries that everyone else ignored, and in doing so, it changed the fate of an entire species. The night air was filled with a sense of possibility. Tomorrow, the colony would face new challenges, as every day on Zarathia brought danger and uncertainty. But Ethan knew they were ready. They had learned from him that fear could be met with courage, that indifference could be overcome with empathy, and that survival was not just about avoiding danger, it was about helping others.